All right, just to Leon's point, really excited for everyone to be here. This is a first of its kind conference in the veterinary M&A space, and something that we've been anxiously waiting for. We have a great panel in front of us, and I want to make sure I give everybody justice with your backgrounds. So I think if we go maybe left to right, Dr. George Robinson, if you want to give a background on yourself, we'll move there, and then Susan.
Okay, George Robinson. I went to veterinary. I am a veterinarian. Went to veterinary school at LSU, and back in the day, it's been a while, and started some practices in New Orleans, Louisiana. I worked there, and thought I was retiring. So my practice, and I ended up in Atlanta, had a non-compete, and I went to work for a company called Banfield. Did not want to do the whole corporate thing, but I ended up really enjoying the really enjoying it, and I grew with the company. They pushed me into management. They're like, "Oh, you need to be," so pushed me into management, and I ended up in about 2 years with Banfield, managing the Western United States. So it's based in San Diego, beautiful San Diego, and managing, I guess, about a 270 million P&L. And Banfield, of course, was in its growth stage and doing extremely well. Mars took over. There were some things I wasn't comfortable with, so I left. And just kind of consulted until I ran into Greg Hartman, who is the CEO of NVA. And Greg was like, "George, if you need something to do, we will find a place for you in operations." So I ended up going to Chicago, downtown Chicago, and managing. We created a region called the Midwest region. We started with 14 practices. We grew it to 42, and I was probably one of the only veterinarians in management with NVA for years. During that time, I ran into, and I'll be brief, I ran into Tyree D'Angelo Partners in Chicago. And they encouraged me to, if I could do it my way, my own mousetrap, what would I do? So I kind of outlined it for them, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, George, you have to do this." And I liked them and got along really well with the guys, if you know them. And so I started Heartland Veterinary Partners with 0 practices in June 1st of 2016. And in 2019, we sold to Griffin. And now we are north of 250 practices, and rapid growth, 99% acquisitions, and it's been a good ride. Our practices are based, all general practices, based on having strong cultures. And some of the issues and topics we'll discuss today, I think Heartland can be an example for some of those, but I'll be able to discuss things across the space.
Perfect, Eric.
Hi, Eric Lewandowski, Managing Director at KPMG. I hyper-focus on the veterinary industry and have done a ton on the sell side, buy side, performance improvement side, and excited to have you all here today.
Susan.
Morning, everyone. My name is Susan Howell. I'm a CPA up in the Hudson Valley. I started with my first practice about 25 years ago. So I'm an outside CPA firm that helps our practices really expand. I do all the traditional outside accounting work, but we also do CAS, which is their backside bookkeeping services. But really what we focused on is a lot of consulting, a lot of building the practices, starting with maybe 1 or 2 doctors and building them to maybe 5, 6, 7, 8. We've done a lot of sales in the last few years. So I've been through that side of getting our practices ready for sale. What does that look like? We found out early on that a lot of the doctors don't have knowledge of their financial statements. They don't understand growth or efficiencies and things like that. So we kind of have those conversations with them. So, been in the industry. We have most of our practices are in the tri-state area. We just expanded to the West Coast, so we're excited about that. But that's what I do. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Any questions that anyone has, we are going to leave time at the end, so keep those in mind. But Dr. Robinson, I think we're going to start off with you on this question. When we think about the growing popularity as it relates to ways to pay for veterinary care, right? You think of whether it be pet insurance coverage for care, whether it be membership-based payment programs, cash pay on site. What are some of the trends or emerging trends that you're seeing within the space currently?
Some of the trends, subscription-based membership type situations where somebody pays a monthly fee, and with that, they get something of a concierge service. They can go to their particular practice whenever they want. Pet insurance itself hasn't really caught on. It's what I find is the pet insurance companies are trying every angle they can by having it on company benefit plans and things of that nature. But still, overall, I would say they probably represent less than 5% of the overall business. And veterinarians, as you probably already know, are slow adopters. So the pet insurance really hasn't caught on. But when you look at the numbers, probably most people don't create or get to a point of where they're going to break their budgets for general veterinary care. When it starts to get into specialty care, that's when you start having those high ticket items. But a general practitioner on an annual visit is probably still within most people's budgets.
And can you define, just for the audience, what specialty care is in this particular case?
Specialty care would be services that require a specialist like orthopedics, neurology, some of the same, probably most of the same specialties that you see in human medicine. And for that, most GPs would refer that to a specialty thing.
Perfect. Eric?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Robinson. The only thing I'd add is that we've seen an emergence of kind of across large aggregators that are getting into not just veterinary, but across kind of the pet services space. Things like exploring how they can augment their current veterinary platforms with insurance platforms or other kinds of veterinary services. So I do think that for most clinics, insurance, much as Dr. Robinson mentioned, will experience cash pay as a continued payment model of popularity. I think over the course of time, we'll see maybe some of the largest players that go and partner with insurance companies then shift to how can we also think about the convergence of that across both their veterinary platforms that they own, plus the insurance companies that they either own or partner with in a significant way. So there could be an interesting kind of nuance to that as we see insurance come about.
And just a follow-on question to that. So you're saying you're seeing more platforms kind of tucking or bolt on insurance companies as well as supplement the payment cycle, or what?
Yeah,
what
we're
would
hearing
be for that?
more on a conversational level.
Okay.
We're hearing more and more from larger platforms that could be an interesting way to grow their platforms.
Okay.
So thinking through, if you can maybe look at someone who's a pet parent and share a discount on veterinary services, but thereby collect revenue from maybe an insurance platform, that could be an interesting way to converge those two ideas of both veterinary platform services as well as insurance.
Okay, oh, great. Susan?
I think we've been talking a lot with our practices as far as they've started packages for puppy packages or, to get them in wellness packages, which is very traditional within, but with what we're doing with the insurance is actually during those particular packages is talking to them about getting insurance early on. Because you may have a certain kind of dog that knows you're going to have hip issues when they turn 7, 8 years old. Having those conversations, building those relationships with the doctors, kind of saying, okay, you're prone to this, or you're prone to cancer, you're prone to this. So, getting the insurance now will help. So when those cases come up, they actually have the funds or they have the insurance to do it.
Sure.
So it's really building a relationship with the doctors. It's really building that they care enough about those particular, about their animal and,
Sure.
What can we do to pay them. So it's not immediate, but they're hoping on a long-term basis, it'll actually have the insurance to do it then.
We've certainly seen the evolution, I think, of the pets becoming family members, to your point, right? It's especially during the COVID crisis where more and more people were getting pets, right, to combat some of the loneliness. So definitely agree with your point on that as far as your thoughts. And we'll keep the mic with you, kind of thinking about the operational side of the industry, when you think of staffing shortages, right? When you think of the healthcare space, there's a shortage of RNs. You know, you're seeing a lot of them shift to traveling nurses based on burnout, compassion fatigue, all these different areas. Are we seeing the same kind of vet tech or DVM staffing shortage within the industry currently? Is it more stable, if you will, or what are you seeing there on that side?
I think it's more stable than it was.
Okay,
But at least, you know, been a big concern over the last few years for sure.
sure.
You know, there was, you know, we've spent a lot of time with the practices trying to figure out why they were leaving. You know, was it burnout? Was it they moved? Was it because of compensation? So trying to figure out, we've done a lot of exit interviews with techs, with doctors to try to figure out why are they truly leaving. They say they're leaving the industry. Why are you leaving
Sure.
the industry? Is it because of burnout? It's not because they just want to change the industry. So we do a lot of exit interviews. Compensation is something we can change. So that's obviously changing. Getting brand new doctors out of school. They're training. So we're starting to see the benefit of that this year. We hired, you know, several last year, didn't really produce, obviously, in their first year. They're learning a lot. So that's coming across. But it has been, you know, bonuses, signing bonuses,
Sure.
traveling. I mean, they've done everything they can to get doctors in.
Great.
But they seem to be stable. You know, they seem to be getting better.
So you're thinking stable going forward at the moment?
It's all about culture, you
Sure.
know, because we're not at the corporate level. So that's what they're competing with.
Sure.
So it's all about the care. It's all about, you know, not always dollars, because they may not be able to compete on the dollar side,
Mhm.
but everything else.
Okay. Eric, interested to hear your thoughts specific to kind of what you're seeing in the PE space as it relates to that side of the equation.
Yeah, for staffing, you mean?
For staffing, yes.
Yeah, I think staffing's an issue across the board. So whether it's recruiting for DVMs, whether it's vet techs,
Okay.
whether it's other support staff, we're seeing that just be a challenge equation. And I think that will continue as we see that demand for veterinary services, you know, grows. Demand is only going to increase. And so I think there's going to be people also trading between different platforms as well. So not only has staffing gotten competitive, but also compensation and it has gotten even more competitive as well.
And how many total, when you say platforms, if you were to think of the, you know, the top consolidators or aggregators in space, how many are we talking about against the total space or universe of clinics, right? Just to give some perspective there as well.
Yeah, so if you think about the market, there's probably about 50-ish aggregators that maybe have, call it 10 clinics or more.
Okay.
That's kind of what we're seeing. And I think but the market is still highly fragmented, if that helps.
Sure. And how many total clinics roughly in the US?
I can give you a number,
Sure.
But highly caveated because it's debated.
Are we talking 20,000?
It's more, I'll call it like 35,000.
35. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good for perspective.
Sure.
Dr. Robinson.
The only thing I would add is just that when we look at our practices capacity, we have capacity. We just need providers and team members, parastaff to provide the service. But just an incredible amount of white space as far as capacity and needing providers. I mean, the numbers are so large for veterinary assistants, registered veterinarians that if the schools turned out at twice their capacity right now, they'd never make it. So the challenge will be to create new efficiencies with the team members that you have.
And how many vet schools in the US? Just curious.
I think 29 or 30.
29. I know New Jersey's just announced
Think it's
Rome
open.
University, they're going to be opening it.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps, you know, curb some of that demand that's out there.
It will.
That's great. So diving in a little bit, Eric, I'm going to go back to you on the kind of performance improvement side.
Yeah.
When you think about clinic level value creation, what are you seeing there being done?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of conversations, especially for private equity owned veterinary platforms, around diving deeper into operationally managing what's going on in a clinic, especially around scheduling. So we think that building off what Dr. Robinson said, if you can get a bit deeper on scheduling efficiently and ensuring that some of the demands that maybe is outpacing supply and
Sure.
capacity is being seen at the right pace and being harmonized to a benchmark across a platform, that can help to manage some of that demand leakage that we are seeing across various platforms.
Okay.
Essentially, what we're seeing is that many people who try to get an appointment are not able to, or the wait time is so long that they have a choice they're making as to whether or not they decide to get care or prolong getting that care, because the wait times can be significant in certain cases.
So
I think, yeah.
Are you seeing, just to play out that point, if they can't get care, right?
Mhm.
Let's say in a scenario, there's an emergency, or they're veterinary emergency clinics that maybe they divert to, or what's kind of their path?
Sometimes they just decide not to get care. So
Okay.
it could go in that direction. It could go to what you're saying, which is moving to a competitor. So maybe their go-to clinic is booked out or can't see them in any foreseeable time frame, but it is something that's clinically more emergent. They can either decide to go to either a competitor clinic or go to more of an urgent care or emergency platform. They could go in any direction they choose to there.
Okay.
But the first point of contact, the clinic they know isn't able to see them. So they're then faced with another decision point as to where do I go next? And there are percentage of people who decide to say, geez, I'll just put it off. I'll wait till there's availability. Maybe they even forget to get that care. It happens on the human healthcare side as well as veterinary. So it's a common theme.
Sure. Dr. Roberts?
Well, I'll agree with everything you said. The only thing I think of when I ponder this is how can we become more efficient? A provider can only see so many patients, but if they leverage their teams, I love to use dentists as a perfect example. The teams are leveraged. The dentist comes and talks to you for 5 minutes. She's on to the next room. Veterinarians have not learned how to do that yet. They're not taught it in school. They're not taught it in practice. But I think once that happens, if it happens, that will make veterinary practice so much more efficient, and we'll be able to see so many more patients and have happy clients.
And we've kind of seen that across the board, as far as revenue is concerned, that, revenue's up only because fees are up or the pricing up, because the number of patient visits that are coming in are drastically down in 2022 and for this year. So it is combating that and trying to figure out how to, fit them in. But again, if you don't have the people, it's hard to get them in there.
Sure.
And there was a lot of movement. Obviously, everybody knows that through the pandemic. So it's where everything is settling out now. But it's a consistent problem. And, we're talking a lot about efficiencies and, how can we increase the visits that we do have, how to make it more efficient, how to make it more profitable. We talk a lot about discounts, not necessarily giving away everything through discounts. So,
Sure.
Same issues.
You hit an interesting topic, the pandemic, right? And I think of the pandemic a lot with the emergence of telemedicine. When you think of telemedicine in the vet space, what is the applicability or maybe lack thereof that you're seeing on your side?
I don't have any practices that are doing it.
Okay.
Or even really talking about
Talking about
it.
Okay. Eric, any thoughts?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing it as an emerging trend. It's different than human healthcare. There are state-by-state requirements, many of which do require a pet parent to come in with their pet to be physically seen in addition to having a telemedicine visit. We're seeing a mix too of both third parties developing telemedicine platforms and then other veterinary platforms partnering with them, as well as those are being developed in-house.
Sure.
It makes sense as an augment to care. So if you have people who have extra capacity who can help via telemedicine, that can make a lot of sense, and having your pet diagnosed or seen for something virtually, especially as you mentioned, kind of with a COVID environment. If that were ever to happen again, that plays out really strongly.
Mhm.
But there are different requirements on the veterinary side for telehealth versus even human healthcare.
And would the pet see, when I think of using telemedicine, maybe I see an RN or some variation that's not the doctor, right? Is that going to
Right.
be the same in the vet space? You'll see a vet tech, you're going to see the actual.
It could be, yeah, it could play out that way.
Okay.
It depends on, kind of like human healthcare, it depends on as you go through the prompts, what the condition is,
Sure.
who needs to weigh in on it. Sometimes there are layers of vet techs as well as DVMs behind the scenes that you may not see that may weigh in at different levels based on the kinds of things that you're asking for. So it can depend.
Okay. Great. Dr. Rose?
I think that platform could exist. It's just vets are slow adopters. And you have to have in every state what's called a veterinary client relationship, which means at some point, the veterinarian has to see the patient before you can go down this road. And one of the problems telemedicine has had is for adoption wise is you still have to have someone talk to them. That same person who's on the screen talking with them could be holding a pad or could be putting in an IV or something of that nature. So it still has to solve some of the manpower issues, but it's there. The efficiencies could occur. It's just going to be a process to train veterinary teams how to become more efficient, how to produce more with what you have. And telemedicine, I think, can certainly.
That makes sense. And in staying on.
We can add to that too, that one other curveball too is, as compared to human health, is that the pet can't actually tell you what's wrong, right? And the human healthcare side, telemedicine works well because you can talk to your physician, you can provide feedback, and they can diagnose you based on that feedback. Sometimes you physically have to be there with the animal to understand what could be potentially wrong because they can't actually tell you what's wrong or tell you what the symptoms are. So that's just another curveball to think about as telemedicine gets applied to veterinary.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And when you think kind of going down the technology path, when you look at the number of online pharmacies, right, that are popping up, you think of Chewy.com and sites like that, you know, how much disruption or what pace of disruption is taking place when you think again of the technology side, it's continuing down that path as we go forward?
Yeah, Dr. Robinson, you want to take that one? I know you've got a perspective.
I do. Any Chewy folks? I don't see the Chewy folks. I know. Well, okay, everyone, of course, during the pandemic, Chewy skyrocketed. Obviously, folks did not want to leave their homes. They wanted the veterinary supplies. Chewy put pressure on veterinarians to use the most logical platform, which of course was Chewy, etc. There are others out there. Now that the pandemic has subsided, people love their veterinary experience. They love going into the practice. They love saying, oh, I saw Susie and I bought some heartworm medicine and flea and tick. They love that. They love that and the experience more than going on Amazon or whatever and using their app. And of course, the veterinarians want to continue to capture that because that brings traffic into the clinic. So I think there's going to be kind of a disparity there. I think the adoption of the online is going to take longer than most people think. And as we blame everything on millennials, they're saying, well, you know, millennials love this. This is big. But the millennials love the in-clinic experience also. So that's just my strong opinion on it. That you know, any of the online folks will say, well, you know, this online's the way to go. Not necessarily when you're trying to get that experience. And that's what people love about their veterinary practices. Most people know their veterinarian, not the facility.
Yeah, and it's also interesting too, when I go to see my veterinarian, they actually have a lot of those pharmaceuticals ready to hand to me at that moment when they're prescribing them, whether it's the basics like ParkGuard, NextGuard, or even something a bit more complex. And so I think that sort of, you know, immediacy of availability when you're in clinic gives them a huge advantage compared to other industries versus even in the human healthcare side. My physician doesn't always necessarily have that pharmaceutical ready for me to just take at that same moment. So veterinarians do have that advantage where they do manage a lot of those pharmaceuticals on site and can hand those to the pet parent immediately versus then Chewy.com maybe being an extra step compared to the immediacy of having a pharmaceutical right there in appointment.
Is there any significant price delta or difference from the online pharmacies to your point, getting it directly to vet that you know?
I haven't seen any.
Okay.
Yeah.
Susan?
Let me take a different perspective a little bit. The practices that I deal with, they do the hard guard, they do have the competition with Chewy. They're competitive on their prices there because they kind of know that they can shop it. But a lot of my practices are doing online. They're creating their own online pharmacies because they want that care, you know, be able to go on, click, get the, you know, script or whatever they need, but through them. So they don't have as much maybe foot traffic coming in. It is nice that they have it there, obviously. But yeah, they're doing both. They're
creating
seeing,
their own infrastructure.
they're creating their own infrastructure. They were using other platforms. It was too expensive. They didn't really like it, so they're creating their own.
Sure.
It's working. It's not a high profit, that's something that we really do look at,
Mhm.
but it's more of a, they're not losing any money, but it's a way to keep them away from maybe some of the other opportunities that they can go online and do.
Sure.
But again, if they keep their pricing right on, the heartworms and things like that they can get, they kind of also see that the other pharmacy, strips and things like that aren't going to be as costly.
Sure.
So it's kind of like, okay, this isn't that bad that they don't necessarily go to Chewy and say, okay, this is an extra strip that they have to do. They can get it there. They're also very good about going to the local pharmacies and say, you can get this cheaper. Again, it's building relationships. So if they know that they're going to have fill a prescription and it's $40, but they can go to Hanford and do it for $20, they'll say that. Like, hey, we can save you money if you go here, on some, but not necessarily all. Again, building that relationship so they become a lifelong client to them.
Correct. And Dr. Robinson, to stay on this topic, very curious is, when I think of medicine shortages, right? You think of amoxicillin and others being in short supply. Is that kind of being felt in the veterinary industry as well? Is there a confined medicine shortage that we're experiencing more?
Not usually. Occasionally there'll be one or two products that will come up. There's a supply chain shortage or whatever. But when that happens, the compounding companies in veterinary medicine respond immediately. I mean, that's when they actually win. A drug comes, it's shorted, the vets respond, they send them to compounding. And the compounding pharmacies usually can create a product, and they have tremendous revenue from that.
Okay.
Can I mention one other thing?
Absolutely.
Just to piggyback on what you were talking about. The other caveat when you talk about pharmaceuticals and goods and things of that nature is veterinarians on their top line, pharmaceuticals are about 25 to 32% of their revenue. And they're not happy and willing to give that up to online because that's a significant part of their profitability. So I don't see anything changing, dramatically of that because I mean, that's affecting the bottom line.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, of course, Chewy.com does have an enormous amount of strength. If you think kind of more broadly than pharmaceuticals, look at pet food and other things, especially with their subscription services, where I think they'll just continue to just grow exponentially. But pharmaceuticals is an interesting subset.
No, that makes sense. I mean, Chewy.com is, in my opinion, the kind of the juggernaut in the industry, right? When
Right.
you think about who people go to when they need pet supplies, I've ordered from there personally, and it's efficient and they're quick to deliver. Want to shift gears a little bit. Probably the biggest topic of any M&A related conference: interest rates and multiples, which everybody loves talking about. Very interested to hear everyone's perspective on the panel. Of, as you think of the interest rate environment we're in, we've seen multiples last year, in some cases, deals traded 15, 20 times even. It just quite insane to some extent, right? Going into the second half of this year, looking forward, what are you anticipating from the interest rate perspective as well as a subsequent multiple perspective as you think of vet deals and we'll say the middle market's upstream?
Sure, interest rates are definitely having an impact. I think it's impacting the pace of deals getting done. So I think we've seen a downtick in acquisitions, especially with veterinary aggregators acquiring for growth. And I think interest rates play a role in that story. In terms of multiples, there just haven't been enough deals getting done kind of at the corporate aggregator level to know where they're going to land. I think everyone's sort of waiting out whatever this recession thing sort of is to see kind of what the next phase will look like in terms of trading volume and deal multiples. But there's just no volume right now.
So if private equity isn't deploying capital, right, in new acquisitions, what are they doing? Are they doing more performance improvement in-house, or what's kind of their plan as we speak?
There's a lot of performance improvement going on right now. I think there's a whole preparation stage happening now for an eventual wave of potential sell side activity, as a lot of assets are just hitting their natural end of hold period for a variety of private equity funds. And I think to prepare for that, performance improving the business is where they're focusing. We've seen a lot of the topics we've talked about today, increase in labor costs and other challenges are what everyone's trying to get their head around
Sure.
as they think about that wave of sell side to come.
Okay, great. Susan.
Question for you. I had a client sell last year, 15 multiple. What I was surprised in was the amount of opportunities or proposals in front of them. And historically, there's been 4 or 5 that would come to the table. They had 13. Do you see it more of a competitive market because, if 15 multiple last year was a big multiple, I wasn't expecting, I'm telling my client, I don't think you're going to get those numbers.
You
That
got
was wrong.
Yeah.
And also to have that many come to the table. So are you seeing it more of a pricing war that's going to come on these better practices?
Yeah, so last year was interesting, and it's actually almost 2 different years combined in one. Think of last year, the first half, maybe first half plus, was exactly as you're saying. It was multiples were really through the roof. We've even heard of some that went above 15 times. And then the sort of tail half of the year, it slowed down immensely. We saw deals come to market, didn't get those multiples that they were looking for, didn't get pulled from market. Now these, just to clarify, are the largest sort of platforms coming to market, which in theory trade for the highest multiples. And so that's kind of last year condensed. In terms of competitiveness this year, it's still hyper competitive. I think that I don't know that it's driving multiples maybe still to that kind of 15 times level. We've heard it's ticked down just a little bit, but still extraordinarily competitive because people are trying to figure out this market. And even at the kind of clinic acquisition level, veterinarians who are looking to partner or to sell themselves are saying, hey, should I hang on to this asset a little bit longer? I know interest rates are higher and wait until that picks up. Or should I go to market now? And I think some are holding back because of that. And so therefore, there might even be fewer to go and acquire for corporate aggregators. It might just be kind of a net effect.
Eric, what are you seeing in the when you think of the capital structure, getting a deal over the finish line, high interest rate environment, right? What are you seeing there? Is there more seller financing, more equity roll? I mean, what anything creative going on in the space?
I haven't seen as much seller financing.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's not a good lever, it is, but I'm not seeing as much of that. I think usually aggregators go to market with an established stack of debt that they deploy on every deal in similar ways. What we are seeing now, I don't know, I'd say more, but what we're seeing structurally is that there's more equity being given to each of the veterinarians.
Okay.
So I think it's more of a retention tool. There's a JV model that's being leaned on by aggregators more and more to bring them into that capital stack and make them equity holders in the practice, so they can own sort of the practice as their own.
Sure, that makes sense. Dr. Robinson.
I'm just in total agreement. I would just say, one word I would say is it's a simmering right now. Folks are waiting. Their capital is waiting to be deployed, and but everyone is kind of waiting on the interest rates. Most of the aggregators.
Okay. Well, no, that's any. You have another comment?
No.
Okay. Just another question. When you think about target composition, right? A lot of practices I've seen are anywhere from maybe 1 to 5 DVMs within clinics. Maybe talk a little bit about the attractiveness or what makes a clinic attractive to private equity or an aggregator consolidator. Is it number of DVMs? Is it maybe having tangential services tucked in? What really that composition looks like?
Yeah, sure.
It's appealing. What further drives that multiple, right? When you think about that, is it having those ancillary services, or is it just being a series of DVMs within a clinic doing 700,000 revenue a piece, right? Just trying to get through that.
Yeah. It's usually 2+ DVMs is kind of the baseline for corporate aggregators to have an interest. Not to say that they won't look at 1 DVM clinics, but it's usually 2+ DVMs. It's DVMs who are looking to stay on for some number of years, so that there isn't an immediate sort of transition in addition to the acquisition happening. So if a DVM is looking to retire, sometimes that can be slightly less attractive to an aggregator. Retire immediately, that is. Not to say that some corporate aggregators don't play in that space. And then I think it's looking at what the potential growth story is of the clinic. So historically, has there been a lot of thinking around managing the data. So every clinic has largely its own PIMS it's deciding on using or not.
Sure.
That the practice information management systems, and have they really looked at their data to understand how is their practice being managed? Everything from the scheduling, as we talked about before, we're having a good insight into that, as well as other operational metrics. Even something as simple as P&Ls that can be taken for granted, but are people diving into managing their costs and their expenses? A lot of times these things are opportunities for aggregators as they think about looking at a practice to partner with, and those can be upside opportunities as they're highly trained in and those sorts of skills, and can assist with a practice and helping it to grow further.
Great. And any comments from Susan or Dr. Rose?
So I'm on the other side trying to get them ready, right?
Sure.
So we do a lot of benchmarking. We do benchmarking on a national level, but we also do it within my client group, which is really beneficial to them because it keeps it within the tri-state area.
Sure.
It kind of keeps it out of the cities a little bit. So they're able to benchmark against each other, so we can kind of we build reports for that. So we keep track of EBITDA, gross, net, doctor's production, salary increases, pretty much every metrics that a hospital is looking for, we put into a report.
Okay.
And we kind of trend that. So, when a doctor says they're looking to sell, we're like, okay, we got 3 to 5 years. That's kind of what you can do it a little sooner, but that 3-year mark is really kind of saying, okay, what do we have to do? Like, how do we have to work on our EBITDA? Not just on EBITDA, but the culture. In our last sale, they actually gave ownership to non-doctors. So the practice managers are very valuable. And when you find someone that is that good running the practice, especially on the business side, they're getting equity too. And they also did a bonus pool. So this particular one matched up to $500,000 in bonuses. Again, to keep their team, because they know the sale is contingent on their team. So it's really talking about that and getting them ready.
Sure.
And, so when you come in, I think that's why we had so many proposals too, is because we actually had a product that we can hand out with the basic information.
Sure.
And truing up the EBITDA, there's always a little cleanup that has to happen with expenses and stuff like that. But getting them ready. So.
Okay. Dr. Rose?
I have one little anecdote. One of the things that I look for when I'm visiting practices, which I don't do anymore, but what's the number of exam rooms? Capacity. Meaning, if I'm going to get it, am I going to be able to grow it? If you walk in and there are 3 doctors and just 2 exam rooms, 1 exam room, and they're all sharing, you're not going to grow that practice. So, you have to weigh those kind of things, but that's just a simple little anecdotal thing that I look at.
Very helpful. And I think at this point, we want to leave some time for an audience Q&A. Any questions that come to mind, just feel free to raise your hand and give you the mic if easier, but I want to open it up.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nicole.
So I have a behaviorally challenged puppy right now, and I called, looking for trainers, and there's like tons of them out there, and most of them seem to be small independent operators. Our vet had some to recommend, and then there was, one who's a vet and a behavior specialist as well. But our 2 vets at our practice say they specifically don't do behavior. I just wonder, is that a trend? I know I asked you a little bit, Susan. Yeah.
There's opportunity there.
Yeah.
Everyone who gets a puppy wants to train. At least let's start with housebreaking, but then all the other behavioral issues. And so that is a profit center that is presently untapped in the vet space. Because think of this, you can tie in other things. You can tie in genetic testing. Let's see why they're acting a certain way. You can tie in a lot of your medical services and physical therapy. So many things can attach to it. So big opportunity in behavior.
In kind of a tangential thought too, we're seeing some early interest, I'll call it, in tangential type of pet focused service type businesses. So you think about veterinary, pet parents are the customer. We're seeing a lot of larger private equity funds start to at least think about the idea of, what about pet resorts? What about pet resorts that also do training? Because the pet is there for an extended period of time. It'd be great if my pet could also be trained on how to walk well when I want to walk the dog, and it's not at the pet resort. So we are seeing a lot I wouldn't say a lot, but some early interest in those kinds of tangential businesses and growth there. Sure.
So I have a practice that has a pet hotel
Mhm.
on the same property.
Okay.
Good hospital, profitable hospital. What they weren't interested, PB were not interested in buying them because of the pet hotel.
Mm,
And I was kind of curious, like, why are they shying away from that? It's a profitable sector. Not pandemic group, obviously, it fell like any other hotel would during that time. But I'm kind of interested, like,
yeah.
they're shying away from it because they have a hotel. And the answer that we got was more like, well, it's, they just didn't want that. There's too many of them. They didn't want to get in that space. But to me, they work together beautifully
Right.
because they feed off each other. Because you have that foot traffic that's coming in. If you have a dog or an animal that happens to have any kind of issues, has seizures, things like that.
Yeah, makes
there's a
sense.
Hospital right there.
So where's it now?
But that's basically what was told, and I was kind of thought be the opposite, because you have two different revenue sources.
Yeah.
That has the training, that has the grooming, that has all the puppy play, pet resort type things. Fully booked, like, forget the summers, like, if you're not there's a waiting list. They get paid 50% up front. Can't cancel, you don't get your money back, like, it's full blown. So I was just kind of curious if there's a thought process to that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we've seen some platforms do a mix of pet resort plus veterinary clinic together. So one that comes to mind is Destination Pet, that they actually have exactly what you're describing. For broader private equity, I think they think about it as being two different buckets, at least at the moment, right? I think veterinary clinics today trade for a very specific set of multiples. And I think the pet resort industry is something which they're starting to look at. And I think they're thinking about what could the multiples be there as well. I think as the pet resort multiples are traded more frequently and we see sort of where they land, then there could be further interest from PE into saying, okay, is a combined platform still going to maintain the multiple that we're looking for, or are they truly two different multiples? And if we mix them, how do we think about it from a valuation perspective? That's my guess with that platform as to where that one's landing. But it's an interesting platform. We've seen others successfully grow that sort of model, like a Destination Pet.
Dr. Robinson, any thoughts?
Oh, no, I agree.
Yeah.
NVA, Destination Pet, they see value, but it is two separate budgets.
Right. Yes, from PE play, it gets a little trickier just because it is two different buckets from a multiple perspective. But over time, that may change as they're sort of thinking about how could pet resorts fit in that spectrum. Is it truly separate, or can it be?
It's on
merged?
one lot.
One lot, yeah,
So
right.
it's not like they can be separated or sold. I mean, you can buy practice and then keep the whole thing separately.
Right.
Their own, but in that particular, and actually I have 3 that are that way, that can't be divided.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah. I mean, maybe they should look at a corporate, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe PE's not the right path, but it's a good model. We've seen it play out successfully for others.
Wonderful. I think there was another question there, and then we'll go back. Go ahead.
Data around tracking efficiency.
What do you mean by efficiency?
Like, you can easily get it on the pens, because right now we've got all these formulas, and you're taking in doctor visit time and output. There's a lot of different things that are going into it. So I didn't know if you have found in all of your.
There's nothing easy about
Yeah.
extracting data from PIMS if it is truly coming from different PIMS. Is that what you're thinking? Is it from different systems or just one? Got it. Okay. So if you got to, in theory, you can get to a place where you can extract the data with comparative ease. I can't say there's anything perfectly easy about extracting operational level data, but we've developed tools, as an example, that can attach onto your PIMS and draw out some of the things that I think you're thinking about efficiency. So everything from scheduling, DVM utilization, other sorts of metrics that operationally can play into an efficiency story. So they do exist if that helps. And if you have 2 PIMs, that's a very promising starting point.
One system that gathers all that information for us. It's just a lot of manual work after the fact.
Yeah, no, it definitely takes sort of a data science step 1 approach, but 2 PIMs is a promising story and certainly something that could be worked with. Yeah, I think I saw another hand as well.
And I have a question. So I'm on the healthcare side, and I've had a lot of my clients go through a transaction. But when the transaction's completed, they really struggle with culture, right? Of the employees as well as the former owners. So if you see anything in your space in the current transactions that have taken place, whereby they're addressing the culture side, right? Because everyone's they're enticed by the dollars, right? And they really want to get to that place, but then sometimes it just falls down.
Yeah, I would love to hear how you dealt with culture as part of your integrations when you would acquire.
One of the things we did with Heartland was to analyze the culture and see if it fits for us. And then we would go in and say, look, we're not going to change it. And we'll maintain it, the manner that it is. And we found that to be effective with our model. Yeah. Doesn't work with every model. I think any aggregator worth his salt should understand the culture to the nth degree that they're purchasing, because that could scuttle the deal really, really quickly. Veterinary medicine, because it's an emotional business, culture is everything.
Question in the back.
Not to walk this back. Comment regarding the boarding. So, the company owns over 200 veterinary real estate properties across the U.S. for navigators, consolidators, and stands. So to your point, or adding to the point that the boarding is actually quite favorable by these groups. So we're building a 10,000 square foot boarding facility on top of our parcel that we have, where there's already a 30,000 square foot animal practice. Because we're going to move what their current boarding facility is outside of the main facility and move it into here. And so this aggregator obviously sees the value that boarding does to go ahead and invest in a brand new building that's outside of the current hospital. And we have multiple properties across the U.S. where we do like that side of both practice and then a separate boarding facility on the person. But I'm thinking you're right. There's definitely an opportunity there.
Yeah, so we're just trying to find the right person.
Yeah. And there's a lot of.
One thing we didn't, well, everyone just assumed, I guess, is pets remember the family. So boarding is huge, because some folks they have acquired new pets. They're not used to traveling with their pets, or they don't see that as being the way to go. They want some trusted individual to take care of their member of the family. So there's huge value. Just incredible.
Dog has a suite with a TV, a bed. I get to watch them on camera.
Yeah, closer.
Spending over $100 a night easily, soon to go away, and the demand's there. They're fun. So it's finding people. It's always about finding people in that side of the sector too. So
Sure. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
You spoke earlier about having the medicine slash after consultation products representing between 25 and 30% of revenue for those clinics. But other than that, like the trend is going upward or downwards. Like my question would be, do people spend more money when they go in person in the clinic versus having like regular treatments, let's say? When you have like, I don't know, a X amount of dollars from the station, and you have a prescription, but is there kind of opportunities to kind of oversell a little bit, like maybe better food or other kind of cares, like big products? I don't know, like kind of like what will be the potential market on these kind of like, external sources from you?
There's opportunity, to, I guess you can call it upsell or laterally sell, products, any pet care needs. Back in the day, the vets kind of went over the top on that with collars and leashes and things like that, and found that it wasn't profitable. And the vets were not sophisticated enough to actually manage retail inventory in the manner that they should. But there's opportunity, but I think it's something that you have to weigh very carefully. What's going to really bring you the margin that you need? For instance, very few vets have food anymore, because the big bags, you can just have it shipped to your home. So they keep just little bags, so they reduce their inventory, and they can promote the product, and then the client can get it shipped directly to their homes. So things of that nature. But the high margin, the flea and tick, the heartworm preventative, you want to be able to put it in their hand and explain what it is, and explain it costs a lot. And some practices work out deals where instead of getting a year supply, you get 6 months, and then they'll send you a notice in 6 months to get the next level, so it won't be as big a financial hit.
Follow up on this one. You think there is opportunities to maybe set up some kind of partnership between, let's say, a food brand and say, okay, push that brand in our clinics, and you can get like some sort of subscription. You can get the food delivered, but like with the clinics being kind of commissioned on it, like getting some sort of money kickback from the food vendor or provider.
It's prevalent. Hills, Purina, you name the pet food company, they're doing it.
Go ahead.
That in terms of bringing oncologists on practice or bringing orthopedists on practice, you don't tend to see that very often. They're generally referring the business out as to trying to bring that.
I think that's an opportunity for individual or group of specialists who don't want a shelter or box to actually go to the practices. That's definitely a business model for folks who don't want to be consolidated. Yeah.
And
You go for it.
I would say there's an elephant in the room. We can barely breathe. It's called IDEX. I mean, they dominate the market. So whatever IDEX is thinking, that's kind of the way the market's going. But there are more players now. So Zoetis is getting in the game, allocating a lot of resources to it. Heska was just purchased. So we just kind of see where things shake out. But IDEX is just huge.
Girl?
Like 6 to 12 months, have you seen collection rates given recessionary pressures going down a little bit, or maybe days outstanding increasing, or has the business been generally kind of shielded from that?
I think shielded simply because it's largely cash pay. So it's kind of just paying up front most of the time. So largely shielded. We haven't seen that there's extended collections because the economy has changed, at least from our view.
Sector, yes, collections, because they're not necessarily always cash pay. Their receivables are a little bit higher, just because of the stay and things like that within. But it's something that technology's come a long way, especially if they're out in the field where they're using iPads, they're trying to get collections there, they're trying to swipe credit cards to get more of the cash pay there. But it's still, it's been on the rise a little bit.
Right, I think it depends on the hospital back. Go back a year, some time, but then months, it's time to pay up.
They struggle with some of the bigger farms, So when they go in and they go into a horse farm and, you know, they see 20, 30 horses, the owners are not necessarily there. So they're billing, so they're having to try to get it on the backside. So, you know, that is something that they're very much on top of, but it has been a little bit of an uptick in the last year or so, yes.
Here, yeah.
Just wondering, kind of piggybacking on the question of technology, there's a lot of great ideas out there, George mentioned, genetic testing, there's digital psychology. There's all these things that are coming out now. I'm just wondering from the panel, who is doing something successfully to institute these great ideas into these busy practices? What kind of best practices are used to all of these new services, particularly medical services, and the handling this?
Yeah, we've seen a few different practices or groups emerge that have been heavy in the technology space, as well as just in clinic design and operational improvement. I think that the thing that gets weighed against that is that it takes a lot of capital investment to create the highest tech and best designed individual clinic. And so the scalability of that model is still an open question. There's a lot of VC investment around that space. We've seen, hundreds of millions going into that for even just a couple of platforms, but they haven't scaled, and it's yet to be seen. Will that then drive a shift of pet parents into those clinics such that that is then viable over a scalable model? So that's what we've seen in thinking through the balance between technology and innovation with maintaining a capital expenditure that's within reason to scale.
I agree completely. 100%.
We have time for one more question. Go ahead.
I don't know, Derek, maybe for you, I guess in terms of kind of thinking about staffing down the road, have they recently looked at, some of your clients looked at kind of med school enrollment and seeing like how the kind of shape and composition of the workforce is going to look for the next 10, 15 years? It's providing investment and eventually the best.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. So we have seen a lot of players get really deep into the statistics around the market growth and assessing everything from enrollments to graduation rates to what share of the recruiting they can capture versus other corporate aggregators. And then to the degree which those schools align with their own platforms, right? So they, just very tactically have a clinic that has an opening and a DVM that's graduating, and do those, location preferences match and those sorts of things. I think this will be a continued supply shortage. I don't think that's going to get fixed anytime soon. We do see more veterinary colleges emerging, but it's not enough to fully address the demand that's there. I do think there'll be further pressure on operational improvement to sort of meet some of that demand leakage. Yeah, it won't solve it completely. Either you agree?
Great. Well, I want to thank the panel for their time today. Great discussion. And any party thoughts from anybody?
No, thank you all for joining us today. This has been a fantastic discussion. And please feel free to approach us after the panel. Happy to discuss anything further.
Great. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Springfield, Missouri, played football at Notre Dame, goes to Pepperdine to law school, got his master's degree, was studying for the bar, and 2 weeks out, 9/11 happens. He calls his mom and dad and says, if not me, then who? And serves 14 years.
You gotta wonder about a guy, man, who does something like that and gets out, and for the betterment of himself, he betters other people. And that says a lot about who he is, actually, where he comes from.
Motivation Billy has is just for service, for himself, for others, take care of his family. That's what really motivates him to go out and do what he does.
Billy was built to protect the vulnerable, regardless of what setting that's in. And I've seen so many times where a veteran has brought to Billy's attention a problem or an issue or something that they were worried about or was struggling through. And I've never one time seen Billy not immediately roll up the sleeves and with passion digging to try to help.
To be able to have someone like that who's a great veteran, you know, he's the type of person you want on your football team, or you want as somebody who's defending our country. You know, I'm glad to know Bill and to have spent that time with him.
I respect it. With everything I got, he saved my life multiple times, and that's what he does. What he got out of the SEAL team, gave service to his country in combat, and now he works for local charities. He goes on Patriot Tour with us, and raises awareness for veterans. I mean, he definitely knows about himself.
Greatest accomplishment, as far as I'm concerned, is the freedom that he's purchased for all of us.
He will fight tooth and nail to get his dreams accomplished. And again, I admire him for that. I really do.
All right. How's everybody doing? Good? Thank you all for having me. Give you a quick synopsis. So what we're going to do today is, I played football with Coach Holtz from 92-96, originally from Springfield, Missouri. Through a lot of hard work and effort, was able to earn a full ride scholarship, played football at Notre Dame, played there for 5 years under Coach Holtz. So I got a million Coach Holtz stories. He was a great motivator, and he really made going through. One of the greatest things I can say about Coach Holtz is he made going through SEAL training for me, at least mentally, very easy. Because he was so hard on us on the football team. He made football games seem easy because practice was so hard. After Notre Dame, playing there for 5 years, I went to law school. I chose law school after 5 cold South Bend, Indiana winters. I chose it by latitude. So went to Pepperdine for 3 years, got my Juris Doctorate, and another year to get my master's of dispute resolution. 9/11 happened. I just dropped everything and I enlisted in the SEAL teams in the Navy. So I came in as an enlisted guy, not as an officer, even though I had 2 more degrees than all my officers. Went through our BUDS class in 2003 training, and then I was deployed 2004, 2005 with SEAL Team 5 to Baghdad and Mosul. Very violent times. 06 and 07, Ramadi. Ramadi's a very small. Baghdad and Mosul are very, very big cities. Ramadi's a very small city. You can go look on Google Earth. It's about 3.5 miles from end to end. So we really, Chris Kyle's platoon in Ramadi, and Jocko was their task unit commander. If you guys watched the movie American Sniper. Marcus Luttrell, who's on the video, the lone survivor. If you saw that movie, him and his identical twin brother came and joined our platoon in Ramadi when we went there. Ramadi accounted for half of all SIG-acts, any significant act by the enemy on any given day in Iraq. So in the whole country of Iraq, this little city that was 3.5 miles from end to end, accounted for half. We could be in one firefight in one block, maybe 4 or 5 other firefights happening all around us. So, and then 08 and 09, I was along the Syrian border in Al-Qaim and in Rawla. And then 2011, the whole year I was in Afghanistan doing VSO, civil stability operations, where we lived kind of like the mud huts that the Afghans lived in. And then we go hunt the Taliban throughout the mountains. And then I got out, worked for the Gary Sinise Foundation. So Lieutenant Dan in the movie Forrest Gump. We've all seen that. And I was the director of Veterans Outreach. So some of those videos you saw, we were building custom smart homes for severely wounded veterans, double, triple, quadruple amputees. And then kind of fell backwards in the commercial real estate title insurance. So that's what I'm doing today. I covered the whole country. So I did 50 Hudson Yards and 55 Hudson Yards over in the city, if you guys know those buildings. And then I covered the whole country. So no one ever grows up and goes, one day I want to get in the title. Said no one ever. So it's kind of funny. It's interesting how I fell back into it. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you guys a little background on the SEAL team. So we have probably about 60 or so sayings from the SEAL teams. And each Navy SEAL saying that I'm going to go over today, every Navy SEAL knows. You hear it basically from the first day you're a Navy SEAL to the last day you're a Navy SEAL. And basically they denote our culture. And I just took 10 of them to do a top 10 countdown for y'all. And I'm going to tell a little military story about it. And then I'm going to tell a business story of how I applied it to business. And these are all little things, little tweaks that you can take that you can immediately implement to your life and will up your game and push the needle for you in life and in business. So in the SEAL team, if I took you guys down there in San Diego to where we do a lot of the training, it's very Spartan. There's a cement grinder. There's some really big pull-up bars. The pull-up bars are real fat, so you can't get your grip around them that well. We got ropes. The ropes are really fat, so you can't get your grip around them that well. We have boats. Most people ride in boats. We carry the boats on our head. We ride in them every now and then. We mainly carry them on our head. And then there's a lot of sand and dip bars and stuff like that. That's basically it for training. For at least for the very first part, it's called the gut check. So my BUDS class, basic underwater demolition seal training class, we started with 220 guys in Indoc, and we went to day 1 with 186. We lost about 30 in Indoc before the training really got super hard. And then we went in the first 3 weeks of training, we went from 186 down to 68. And then we started Hell Week on the 4th week of training, and it was in January. So I don't know if you guys all been to the Pacific. The Pacific's nice and cold during the winter. Kind of nice and cold all year round, to tell you the truth. But in the winter gets down, the water gets down to 50 degrees. And then on Sunday night, they do a thing called Breakout Hell Week. And then for the next 5.5 days, we get secured on Friday afternoon. I got 1 hour of sleep in those 5.5 days. And we're just constantly moving and running. At the end of Hell Week, because you're wet and sandy the whole time, wherever your uniform grates you, it just grates all your skin away. And then I couldn't even tell where I had knees because I just had one big thigh that went right in the lane. I kept thinking that the sun was shrinking my boots, but my feet were swelling up the whole time. And then I didn't have any hair on the top of my head because the boat had graded it all the way, and I just had like a turtle shell of scabs. It was kind of pretty cool. It's like a Bosley medical one infection. And my SEAL buddies, I'm a bigger Navy SEAL than most guys. Most Navy SEAls are anywhere from 5'5" to 5'10" or 11, weigh 135 pounds to 175. I'd say those are like your elite type of Navy SEALs, and most of them are former wrestlers. So the number one place they recruit is former wrestlers. Number 2 is probably water polo players, and just guys who are used to the grind. People like me who are football players who like to go really hard for about 3 to 6 seconds and then take a 30-second break. We don't do as well in training. I always say all my SEAL buddies ran like gazelles, swam like dolphins, and climbed the obstacle course like Tarzan, and I did everything like a wounded elephant. So I was rumbling, stumbling, fumbling all the way through. And then the one thing I was better at than anybody else in my class was taking the cold water because it's fatter than everybody. So don't realize that that adipose tissue was a competitive advantage, but I assure you it was in the cold water. So there'd be guys who were jackhammering and shivering. I wasn't even cold yet. There's this wooden sign that says "Be someone special," and this very first saying right here, it all starts with a vision. I'm a special breed of warrior. I will never quit. That's one little line of our Navy SEAL ethos. You can all go look up the Navy SEAL ethos. It's about 2 pages. And one of the things I realized, if all the guys that were standing at the end of Hell Week, most of them weren't the greatest athletes or there were people going through our SEAL training that I used to wish I could be like. I used to wish I could run like, or climb the obstacle course like, or do different things like. And the next thing I know, they were gone. And they weren't standing there at the end. And when I looked around, there were some of the guys I never thought in a million years that they would be standing there at the end of the training. And I'm sure people saw me at the training like, "You're still here?" Right? And so one thing I realized about everybody that was standing there at the end is they knew one thing about themselves. It was just part of their personal ethos, whether they were conscious of it or not. And that's just that they knew that they would not quit, that they would die before they quit. And it had to be something that was felt with all your mind, all your soul, all your strength, and everything. So if you had 2 guys and one said, "Oh, I'm not going to quit," and the other said, I don't know if I'm going to be some great warrior, some great Achilles, whatever, but I know this, I will die before I quit. Then that guy was going to make it through at the end. So it all starts with the vision. And the very first takeaway for tonight is what I would ask everybody in the room is, what is your warrior ethos? What is your ethos for business, your personal life, your professional life, in different areas? And it doesn't have to be 5 pages or 6 pages. It could really start with one thing. And it could even be stated in the negative. So I am not this person, or I'm not that, or I will not tolerate this in my life, or whatever else. And so that, when you feel with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, starts you on your journey. And what I encourage everybody to do is start on your own warrior ethos. You can go look at the Navy SEAL warrior ethos. That's ours. That's only one line from it. It's about 2 pages, but you don't need that. You really only need one thing to get yourself started. And from there, start building your warrior ethos out and create what that ethos is in every area of your life. All right. Rely on each other. You can't win alone. Never leave your swim or your dive buddy. The first thing that you learn in SEAL training basically is wherever you go, you have a swim buddy. Basically, wherever you go, you're running, number one, and number two, you always have a swim buddy. So if somebody's got to run to admin, and if you got to go to the restroom, you can't go to the restroom, you got to take a swim buddy. Wherever you go, you have to have a swim buddy. This is the cardinal rule, and what it is there to teach us and ingrain in us from the very beginning is that we're not some type of Rambo or some type of, Chuck Norris that you just unleash and go. You have to learn to develop your team and your teammates, and that you have to be able to rely on each other. And one of the biggest things, and when I say rely on each other, it means basically having yourself extremely wired tight, and then having enough bandwidth to help your buddy when they're weak, right? Because one day on different missions or whatever, I might feel like Superman and feel invincible. Another day I might not be feeling so great, but I still got to have all my stuff wired tight, and then you can kind of feed off each other. And so in business, you have to develop your team and develop people and also work with each other in close relations. And also you have to develop relationships. I'm in business development and business, and the biggest thing that I'm doing is I'm developing relationships all across the country. And the number one tool I use to do that is just what I learned in law school, which is the Socratic method, which I'll sit down with somebody and say, hey, Joe, where are you from? Or hey, Leon, like, where'd you get your start? Oh, that's cool, blah, blah, blah. And then whatever they answer with, I just lead to my next question. And what I'm looking for is a couple of things. Number one, I'm listening intently to that person with genuine sincerity and care in my heart to learn about that person and who they are. And they will teach me things about themselves. They will teach me what's important to them in life. They will teach me what their interests are in different things. And all those things give me the ability to add value to them in their personal and professional life. And I remember one time I was having dinner with someone who endowed a whole university business school. And I was sitting with him and his best friend for the last 10 years. And I sat down next to him, and I was so excited to have this dinner. And we're at this really nice restaurant here in New York City. It was a Greek place with where they got all the fish on the ice. You can go in there, see, I forget the name of it, maybe someone here knows. But I remember I was sitting down with him and I was talking to him, and I just started using the Socratic method. And I just asked him, like, Tom, like, so how'd you get your start? And, how'd you get to school, blah, blah, blah. And he got there on a wrestling scholarship, told me about his broken home that he came from and how he just developed himself through the times, the different situations he came in business. And we were sitting there, and about 40 minutes into it, his best friend looks at him and goes, Tom, I've known you for 10 years, and I've never heard one of these stories. I was just thinking to myself, I was like, and so basically you could be working with somebody your whole life and not even know so many different things that make them tick or how they, how they became who they are today. And what I'm always looking for is I'm looking to build a relationship so I can add value to them. I'm also looking for inspiration in my own life. I have found the greatest inspiration from talking to people, learning things about them. There's so many people that have so many different incredible stories. Somebody who lost somebody, or somebody who overcame cancer, different things in their life or in business or learn stuff. So as you go through your time, the number one thing that you can take from this is you can't win alone. You have to build these strong relationships in your business. We have to do it in the SEAL teams. Number one way to do that, I found, is through the Socratic method. It's the easiest thing in the world. And make it a joyous occasion. Like, you're going to learn so much, and look for inspiration in your life, and also different things that you can, how to add value. I look at myself in business as a missionary of goodwill. I'm going to go out and add goodwill to everybody I meet. I don't even look for something to return to me, because I'm on my next mission of goodwill. But enough will come back to you that will make all the difference in the world. So you can't win alone. Develop your swim buddies in business and in life.
Again?
And then where should I point this?
It's just working.
Okay.
I got you.
I got me. Okay, boom.
Almost a boom. There we go.
There we go. All right, this comes from my William Urey's book on Getting to Yes. I learned in my master's program, and this served me well in the SEAL teams, because in the SEAL teams, it's kind of like, you got a bunch of alpha mentality, and conflict is inevitable, especially when you're with each other 24/7. You're in high stress situations. And so one of the things that when I had just joined SEAL Team 5, the very first quarter of the year, we had done land warfare, and I was just bringing everything I had to everything that we did. And I made junior SEAL of the quarter, my very first quarter at SEAL Team 5. Now, the next block of training that we had was Kill House training, which is, think of hostage rescue, where we're training for hostage rescue. And it's a very stressful environment. And so one of the things that they do to add stress on you is if you do things wrong in the kill house or anywhere in training, you can get a safety violation. If you get 2 safety violations, you go in front of a Trident review board, go in front of a table with basically 3 judges. And the first thing you do is you take your Trident off and you put it on the table. And at the end of that, to decide whether you can put it back on or whether you're on a probationary period for 6 months to a year, or if you can never put your Trident on again. And guys lose their Tridents all the time after they become Navy SEALs. And so we were in this kill house training. And so a kill house is a building where you're training for hostage rescue, and the walls are all made of material that will basically absorb the bullets when you shoot them. And so you're basically gonna think about going into a bad guy's compound, and you're gonna go rescue a hostage or take down a high value target in HVT. So the very first day that we were doing this, we had done some walkthroughs, and this was gonna be the very first day of live training. So my OIC, my officer in charge, he was gonna be over here, and he was gonna open the door, and then I was gonna be the number 1 man through the door. So I'm gonna come through the door. I'm gonna clear this corner and go work my way to the center of the room. He's gonna come off my tail and work clear this corner, and then 3 and 4 men are gonna come through the middle and clear the middle of the room. Well, he showed me a flashbang, which is a diversionary device, and I nodded him, which meant I knew he was going to throw the flashbang in. Now, if you run in on a flashbang or don't let the flashbang go off, that's a safety violation. It was our very first day of a very first run of live fire, and so the instructors had put 4 unknowns in the room. So if they put these paper targets that are the size of human beings, if they have a gun or a knife or some type of lethal weapon, they're considered hostile. If they don't, they're considered an unknown, which could be the hostage. So if you shoot an unknown, that's a safety violation. All right. Well, the instructors on our very first live run, that they had put 4 unknowns in there. So if you engaged any of them, that would be considered a safety violation. So he shows me the flashbang. The flashbang is a device that you throw in a room and goes flash, then bang. Everybody following me? All right. You guys are so much smarter than the last group. Okay. So he shows it to me. I'm over here. I give him a nonverbal cue, basically nod my head, which means I know he's going to throw it in. Well, when he opened that door, it's basically like I was back playing outside linebacker for Notre Dame, and that was the ball game time. So as soon as he opened that door, I was so hyped up. I just blitzed through that door, and I shot everybody in the room. And at first, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I was looking at my groups, my shooting groups. I was like, oh man, I was like, all clear, all clear. And I'm looking around, and I realized I'm the only guy in the room. There should be 3 other people with me. And the instructors are blowing the whistle. And even when it's a perfect run, they're like, the instructors are nitpicking you for little things that you did wrong. And I noticed like none of the instructors were yelling or screaming or anything like that. And then I was like looking around, I'm the only guy in the room. Then I started looking at the targets closer. I'm like, that's an unknown, that's an unknown, that's unknown, that's unknown. And I go, I didn't hear that flashbang go off. And I realized right then and there, I'm gonna have a really bad day. So I walked out, and like when somebody's upset with you and they're yelling or screaming at you, I promise there's a whole nother level. And that level is when no one will even give you eye contact within your team, right? So I go out and I'm like looking for comfort in somebody's eyes in my platoon, and people look at me and look away and just like shake their head. The instructor was sitting there going like, wow, we've actually never seen that before. And my LPO, my leading petty officer, comes and takes my weapon away, and there's this tire that you have to go pull if you make a mistake. Start pulling the tire. I pulled that tire for like the next 5 to 6 hours. And so I figured I was getting 5 safety violations. They were going to send me home, and I was going to go. And so in my platoon, you have your OIC officer in charge. You got your chief. My chief was this really hard, tough guy that even after I made junior state of the quarter, anything I do right, never give you any praise, just constantly ride you in only negative reinforcement. Yay. And so I was packing my bags that night, and my LPO comes in and he goes, what are you doing? I go, well, I'm packing my bags. You're going to send me home, aren't you? And he goes, no, unpack your bags. And I go, what's going to happen? How many safety violations am I getting? And he said, you're not getting any. He goes, chief went to bat for you. He goes, but, and he goes, and it's a good thing you made all your mistakes in the same run. So in the very first run of the day, and he goes, but you got to slow down. You can't go faster than you think. And no one could have said anything to me at that point that could have made me feel any worse than I already was, because I was extremely hard on myself. And it was something I took away for the rest of my time in the SEAL teams. As long as everybody's extremely hard on themselves, then I'm going to coach and mentor everybody, because I know there's nothing I can say after that could make them feel any worse. And so the thing to take away from this is have a conflict resolution process. In William's book, he says, separate people from the problem, focus on objective criteria, focused on, not on positions, but interests that are driving those positions. And then agree to come to some kind of collaborative group. So the main thing here is to always have a conflict resolution process in place. There were so many times in the SEAL teams that I realized something was not a performance aspect, but it really was a personality conflict. And I had to work through those things once I became a leader. And as long as everybody in my platoon was hard on themselves, then I would coach and mentor them. All right, number 7, complacency kills. We're in Ramadi, all-day firefight doing a sniper overwatch. At the end of the day, we had been handed down an SOP. An SOP is a standard operating procedure. Now, these are things that are bright line rules that you do not break no matter what. One of the SOPs we had gotten handed down from Chris Kyle's platoon was you never leave, once you're in the city of Ramadi, you never leave to go back to base until after 2200, which is about 10 p.m. The reason for that is because Pathfinder, which was a group that would go find all the IEDs, the improvised explosive devices in the streets, would go and clear them out. They had these big vehicles that could take explosions and rollers and everything like that. We'd been in an all-day firefight. We were probably only like 5 minutes from our base. We probably could have walked there in about 3 minutes from vehicle, maybe 5 to 8 minutes by walking. So we're in this really dangerous area. And we all started kind of grumbling. And we just said, hey, man, if we had to go back out the next day, we just thought, if we get home a few hours early, there's nothing really happened at night. We can get back, we can take off our gear, we can get a few extra hours of rest. And no one said anything. I didn't say anything. Mark didn't say anything. No one else in our task unit commander didn't say anything. So we all agreed to go home early. So we left about 7 or 8. It was dark outside. And I was the driver of vehicle 1. We weren't even out. I was driver of vehicle 1, and our last vehicle, we had 5 vehicles, wasn't even completely out of the gate. I think vehicle 1 and vehicle 2 were out. Marcus was the vehicle commander, so he's in vehicle 3. And we hit an IED. And our vehicle went up in this huge fireball. The front of our vehicle lifted up off the ground, this huge fireball. My fastest sniper rifle shoots at about 3,000 feet per second. Explosives go anywhere from 10,000 to 25,000 feet per second. All right. So this type of explosive, which probably traveled about 18,000 feet per second, to give you an idea of the speed that these things happen in. And luckily, it was a certain type of IED that was very focused. It's called an EFP, and it made a perfect hole in all our body armor, all our armor for our vehicle and our engine block, like a perfect manhole cover hole. But all of us in the vehicle were able to walk away from it. So now, for the rest of my whole time in the military, do you think I ever broke another SOP? No. Because we were all able to walk away from it, right? The business we were doing, I do a lot of business where we're bringing in money from overseas, Korea, Singapore, different places. And so one time we were doing this deal, and there was a group from China that had infiltrated the email chain and changed just 2 letters, and all the emails changed from the principal, and told the principals and told the people, us, the escrow, and the outside counsel, to push the money to a different bank account overseas, right? Luckily, because we followed all our things, there was a little bit of confusion because they kind of basically tricked the outside counsel. We were able to save that deal. And I always say, if you ever lose on a deal, you lose like 5 times. You lose on that deal, you lose the personal relationship that's going to be fractured because you didn't do your job the way you were supposed to. You lose your market share that you could have grown with that client. You lose whatever warm introductions that they would make to other people and other clients. You lose the market share that you could eventually have grown with that other group. So it's very important to do everything right. And luckily, because we did everything right, and we caught it, my team caught it and everything, it preserved all those things, and we looked like the heroes, right? And then people, instead of saying like, hey, a lot of people call me Wags, feel free to do so. Hey, Wags, instead of Wags, you saved us, right? You saved us. That was a close one, right? So what are your SOPs that you're going to put in your business and different things? You can have your SOP. They should be minimal as possible, but these are bright line rules that you never break. That we have them for our company, but then you have to have them in your business and different things and stuff like that. I have them in my personal life and in my professional life. So as you build, what are your SOPs that you're going to build and I promise you, one day they will save you. Okay, one day they will save you. I promise you. But keep them out there and have them in your personal life, your professional life, and know them and have them within your team in your different areas. And then you kind of continue to build your team and safeguard. All right. Number 6, plan your dive, dive your plan. Who here has been diving underwater at night? 2, 3, all right. How far can you see at night? Not very far, right? Under the water in the ocean, can't even see your hand in front of your face. So when we have a 4-hour dive, approximately, we will plan probably 12 to 16 hours for that dive. Okay, because it's methodical. Because like if I'm going out here and I'm driving around, if I'm walking around the city, I might say, oh, I go to Main Street and First Street, and oh, I need to take a right by the CVS or whatever. Like when you're underwater, you don't have any of those capabilities. You have to methodically plan your dive, and then when you're underwater, you have to methodically execute your dive. Okay, and you have to execute it no matter what else is going on, no matter what doubt is happening in your head or whatever else. So one time we're doing this dive in San Diego, and if you ever go down there and see, if you're ever on the USS Midway down there, which is now like a museum, you can go on there, and if you look just to the south of the USS Midway, you'll see this this pier with all these little small ships. So we were going to go hit 2 ships on that pier and plant our limpet mines that we use to hit ships with. And so we were going through, and while I was underwater, you got to watch your depth, and you got to watch a couple other things. But you want to watch your depth so you don't porpoise and come accidentally to the very top. So you want to make sure that you're going along well, and you don't want to come to the top. So you don't want to hit a boat. We got some safety boats out there, but still there can be a danger. And so when I was going, the next thing as I was kicking out, I felt a boat go right by me, and I felt its weight, and it was like shockingly powerful. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I wasn't watching my depth, and I almost came up and almost porpoised, and I looked at my depth, and I'm still at 20 feet deep. I thought to myself then, that could only be a marine animal. And so I couldn't come up out of the water and go, excuse me, instructors, but there's something really big that's moving really fast. Now, if it took a big chunk out of me, I could come up and I'm like, I'm good over here, but over here, I missed a good portion. And I could have got, so the only thing to do is continue to execute your dive. And this is where I talked a little bit about courage. A lot of people think that courage is a feeling. If you're waiting to feel courage, you'll wait till the day you die. Okay. Courage is not a feeling. Courage is only something that you can demonstrate when fear is present. Okay. And I often say fear and faith are really only the same thing. One just believes something bad's going to happen, and one believes something good is going to happen. But the only time that you can demonstrate courage is when you have fear present. Okay. So, and the way that I think is the best way to demonstrate courage, and I mean this in business too. It's the best way to demonstrate courage is to focus on your next microsecond goal. And so what I did was I focused on my instruments, making sure I was continuing to execute the dive. And by focusing on my goal as hard as I can and talking myself through that situation using good self-talk, but instructional self-talk about what the next step is and to execute it all the way, and talking to myself all the way through that and taking a deep breath and calming myself down, then you demonstrate courage. And it's the same way in a firefight, whether you're getting shot at. We'd be on a rooftop in Ramada and returning fire. When I'm returning fire, every thought in my head is you're going to die, you're going to die. But you mitigate that voice from a loud roar in your head to a faint echo in the back of your head by focusing on the task at hand. We all have to do that sometimes in business to some other level. It might not be life and death, but it's focusing on these tasks at hand. We're all managing risk. We're all doing different things. And so it's focusing on your next micro goal to push. And the only time that you can demonstrate courage is when you have fear present. The other thing that I use from this is I take a couple days a week. They're usually Wednesday and Thursday because those days I'm in business development. Those days have the highest probability for a return email, for return phone call. And if you think about the business, Fridays, a lot of people are checked out. Monday and Tuesday, people are getting ready on their week. So Wednesday and Thursday are high priorities. Well, Wednesday and Thursday, that's when I try to get maybe six meetings a day, do a whole bunch of phone calls, and I overload those 2 days. I still execute on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, but I have 2 push days a week. Okay. You can have 1 push day a week. Okay. But getting out there and pushing and seeing how far you can go. All right, next one. All right, earn your trident every day. You hear this from the first day you're Navy SEAL to the last day you're Navy SEAL. And your trident again is the insignia that designates you as Navy SEAL. Congratulations, you made it through SEAL training. That's wonderful. Earn your trident today. Congratulations, you were awarded the Bronze Star with Valor, the Silver Star. No one cares. Earn your trident today. Earn your trident today. Earn your trident today. Today we're working on the boats. Okay, well that's not really brave or anything like that. We got to work on the motors. We got to doesn't matter, earn your trident today. Whatever your goal and your tasking is for, whatever your goal and whatever you're tasked with that day, you gotta bring your A game with all your preparation and your full mental focus to earn it that day. And so on my first mission in Afghanistan, I remember I was going out to the VSO site and I thought to myself, hey, this isn't my first rodeo. This is my 4th deployment. I know we're going to be rucking up and down the mountains because most of what you do in combat is carrying heavy weight up and down the mountains. So I'd have 40 or 50 pounds of first line gear with all my magazines and radio and medical pouches and body armor that never leaves your body. And then I had about a 70-pound ruck with my sniper rifle down the back of it and all my bullets for that. And I had my regular semi-automatic weapon in case I got in a firefight to and from, because you don't want to be in a firefight where you got to move and everything like that with a scope bolt rifle. Okay. So I was like hitting a treadmill, doing these other things. I was in a reasonable good shape, but I wasn't doing the thing that was specific to my mission. When I got out there to the VSO site, and the first time that we went up and down the mountains with all that weight, it's a lot different than running on a treadmill. And I realized right then and there on that first mission, I was like, oh man, I'm hurting. I'm hurting in a different way because I was in good physical shape, and I realized that I put the rest of the team that I had joined in a bad position if we were to go through something really hard, because I was smoked. Okay. Luckily we got through that mission and nothing too bad happened on that. But then I changed everything I did and I got in incredible shape while I was there. But I realized specificity, right? So a lot of times, what are you doing in your business that is specific to you pushing the needle for your business? In my business, I'm business development and I'm generating income. I'm out there creating relationships and generating income. So those are the things that I need to focus on. There's other things too I need to focus on, but I need to make sure that I'm putting my time and effort towards those specific things that are going to push the needle for me and what I'm tasked with and my duty and responsibility for my company. So earning it every single day with specificity towards your goals. Okay, the only easy day was yesterday. So I was a sniper, and I was in sniper training. I was one of the best shots in sniper school. Sniper school is about 3 months long. And then after that, we do all these different trainings where we would go, where we compete against all the other snipers and the SEAL teams. We do these obstacle courses and everything like that, where you get your heart rate way high up. Well, I was always almost hitting 100 out of 100, but I was always the last person to complete in time. So you were graded by how fast you completed it, and you were graded by how accurate you were. Well, so I was always one of the most accurate, but I was also the very last person all the time. So guys, because they're so friendly and lovable, and the SEAL teams would always say, hey, you know, have WAGs go do the mission if you want to get it done by end of year, right? So I started studying and reading everything I could from all the different shooting manuals and all these different things that I could to kind of help up my game. And 95% of everything I read, I already knew. And I went down so many different rabbit holes and all these different things. Well, one time I read an article by a 7-time world championship shooter, and there was one tactic that he said that he used when his heart rate was really high that I had never heard before. Never heard anybody teach, never heard anybody talk about, anything like that. The next obstacle course that we did, I implemented it into the training, and I ended up first by about 1 minute and 15 seconds. So think of a track meet. If one guy finishes and the next guy's 1 minute and 15 seconds behind him. All right. So I went from being the butt of a lot of jokes and then to everybody going like, oh my gosh, like, you know, Wags is did it on another level and all these things, right? And I had just basically implemented one new tactic, but I had gone down probably 15 to 20 rabbit holes to go find that one tactic. So my whole point here is, how many businesses start and are great in the 1980s or were on the Fortune 400 in the 1980s that aren't there today, right? How do Jobs and Wozniacki beat IBM when they're building a computer in a garage and IBM is already a Fortune 300 company? So what I'm saying is take every single day and take 20 minutes to an hour or even on the weekends and make it fun. Just stay curious. Go down different rabbit holes. Take one different thing from anything that you're tasked with or anything that you want to learn or get better with, and just start digging deep into it. And knowledge adds up like compounding interest. And if you do that 20 minutes a day over a year and stuff like that, you'll be amazed at how far you go. So I spend a portion of my day just market research. And what I mean, I just mean that very broadly. On different companies, on different things, on different cities. I might go into a deep dive on industrial in Houston or what have you, or in different areas for my thing, just adding knowledge every single day. So only easy day was yesterday. Continue to sharpen yourself and learning every single day that you can. All right, shoot, move, and communicate. Now this is on the other side of that. All right. When we're doing a planning, there's, we have I had 7 different weapon systems that I would use to shoot. You can shoot standing up, different things, different tactics you can use. There's a million different ways you can maneuver. I infiltrated by helicopter. I infiltrated off boat. I infiltrated by vehicle. I infiltrated on foot, and sometimes a combination of all those. And there's a whole bunch of different ways you can maneuver, breaking up into different groups and taking different things down. We always have a primary, a secondary, a tertiary, and a no communications plan. We're out there in the middle doing our deal. Our briefs before we go on a mission are sometimes an hour long, just to get through every aspect of the mission when we're doing the brief before we head out the door. And it's almost death by PowerPoint sometimes. But here's the thing: if we do these 3 things, and so you got to go down the rabbit hole sometimes, but here's the opposite of that. When the rubber meets the road, what 3 things that if you do every single time and you execute those fundamentals every single time will make you number 1 in your industry and number 1 on that mission? If we outshoot, if we outmaneuver, and we outcommunicate our enemy every single time, we're going to win the firefight every single time. So we go down and we have to cover all these bases, but at the end of the day, before we go out the door, we tell everybody, hey, no matter what happens, always remember, outshoot, outmaneuver, and outcommunicate the enemy, and we'll come out all right. All right. So what are those fundamentals? If you just dominate those fundamentals every single time in a marketplace and this or that, if you dominate those fundamentals every single time in your business, okay, you're going to be number 1. And never forget that. There's a time to go down different rabbit holes, but there's a time to execute. And there's a time to do the fundamentals better than anybody else. That if you do those things, those 3 things, you will win every single time. So know those. And we got to cover down on a million things, but at the end of the day, do those 3 things better than anybody else. Next. All right, turn the map around. So when you're overseas and you're going out on your missions, you're always looking into the enemy territory from your perspective. From where you are, and you're looking at the map from your perspective where you're going to go out. You're planning your routes. You're doing these things. You're doing those things. When we were Afghanistan in VSO ops, and the enemy knew where we were at, they would mortar us usually twice a week, sometimes more. And a mortar is like a device, you've probably seen them in the old war movies and current ones, where it's kind of like a long tube, and they drop a little artillery shell in it, and it shoots up. And they can go anywhere from 2 to 6 kilometers. Excuse me. And land it. It's an area weapon. And to be very accurate with mortars, you basically have to, it's called a point of origin site. They have to shoot them from basically the same point of origin site every single time. They have to have a forward observer. So wherever the mortar lands, the forward observer can radio back and tell them where to correct their shot. Well, when they first started mortaring us, they were very inaccurate. They were hitting about 500 meters away. And a mortar has a kill radius of about 20 meters when it lands. Okay. Well, one day they hit about 50 to 75 meters in front of our site, 50 to 75 meters behind our site, and then they hit right next to where we had 5 guys. And the one that hit right next to where we had 5 guys stuck in the ground and didn't detonate. The other 2 went high order. Okay. And those 2, the one that stuck in the ground didn't detonate. We got our EOD guys, or explosive ordnance guys. They went and removed it and detonated it somewhere else. It didn't explode. Otherwise, those guys would have probably all been dead, and best case scenario, severely wounded. So then what we decided to do is we all got around the map and we turned the map around, and we said, if we were them, where would we be shooting the mortars from? And we all agreed it was probably in this one area, which gave them the best cover and everything else. And we geared up and we went out like within 20 minutes, and we found the point of origin site. They had taken the mortar and ran with it, but we saw where it had kicked into the ground. And we basically sent a message around that area. I can't go into the message, but it was basically, don't mortar us again. We didn't say please, but it was very effective. And so what I do in business is, one of the biggest things I do when I go talk to anybody, and to a prospective client, is I always ask them, what do you like about your current title company, and what could they do better? All right. And what's interesting is, how many times do you think the title company that they're working with is asking that question to their client after every deal that they did, right? And it's called, in the military, it'd be called an after-action report. And we have 2 types of after-action reports in the military. The one is the informal one, where we get all the Navy SEALs in the room, and everybody's brutally honest with each other about the mission. And it could be just little things like, hey, man, you didn't have good space, and over here on the breach, this went a little wrong, or over here on this, blah, blah, or hey, we had a flat tire and, we got to get faster on changing the tire, blah, 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 da, da, da. And then we have the formal one. That's the one that gets written up and put into history for all time. So I always tell everybody, have an after action report both internally within your team, and then have one externally with your clients. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to send it to your client and say, hey, fill out these next 5 pages, or, what do we do 1 out of 10? I like to just get on the phone with them and go, hey, how did that deal go from your perspective? What do we do well? What can we do better? And you have to ask, for me, it's asking all the different parties, the buyer, the seller, the outside counsels, right? And saying, hey, what do you like to see on the deal? And what that does, it just gives me knowledge to kind of better our team. And over the course of these last 8 years in business, me and my team have just constantly been getting better. Different tweaks of how we do different things, little tweaks here and there, a bunch of little tweaks throughout your whole pipeline of work from the start to finish of doing a deal for us are game changers. And the number one way I grow my business is getting that first bite at the apple with a client. And then we do such a great job that we start to grow our market share within that client. And this is the number one way I grow my business until they don't want to work with anybody else. And when they have to, for one reason or another, they're like, Wags, man, you guys are just off the charts and blah, 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 and da, da, da. So build your after action report, turn the map around, see both internally and externally what we can do better. I've worked on myself a great deal on getting better in meetings, and I've also worked on a great deal with myself within my internal team. I've seen how I can do things better with them, and that's a humbling process, right? They told me like, maybe be a little less intense, so turn the map around, create your after action reports. All right, last one. All right, we're all veterinary people out there, so things out. And this is what I say is know your time in history. Things out is an acronym for focused aggression now, and the G is 2 G's actually, with both grit and grace. Okay. And the focus is what is your goal that day to execute your plan. The aggression is to jump in to that plan with both feet. Okay. Whatever that plan is, whatever fears, whatever doubts you ever have in your mind and different things you're going through, because we all do. I wake up every morning not feeling like Superman. I wake up every morning with usually like doubts and different things going through my head about different stuff. And every day I gotta rearrange those things, get myself going in my brain going in that right direction. Right. It's just, I don't know, probably something we're a little bit wired with as humans, like whatever the fear is for that. So I say focused aggression now. When we were in Talifar on January 31st, 2005, it was the first day of free elections in Iraq. When we were in Talifar, we're in this place called the Talifar Citadel. And the Citadel is basically a castle in the middle of the city. Parts of that Talifar Citadel date all the way back to the Assyrian Empire around 3000, 4000 BC or whatever. And it's been built up through the generations. The Ottoman Empire built it up, and it had the arrow slits, where it's kind of carved like a snake eyes pupil where you can shoot out either side. And so we were there on the day of elections, and before the sun came up that day, the insurgents had surrounded the city and let out a barrage of gunfire for about 5 to 10 minutes while it was still dark outside. And that was to intimidate the local populace from going out to vote. And then when we were, as the day went on, we were in an all-day firefight, and 2 of our guys got shot that day, and it was going on all day long. And I remember they came over comms and they said, hey, this is how many people have voted through Iraq today. And they got to Baghdad and Mosul, and they were in the thousands. They got to Talifar, and I forget the number, but it was somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000. And I was just like, I came over comms and I said, no way anybody's voting in this. And they said, Wags, come over to the northeast side of the castle. So I left my post for a second. I ran over there. You look down there in your scope. I looked down there in this cordon off area by the army, not even a really great cordon off area. I saw that Iraqis who had the ink on their fingers and they were holding hands, they were dancing in circles because they had just voted. I could not believe my eyes. It was one of the days that literally changed my DNA. It says, watching the democracy get born. Now, you fast forward to 2014, ISIS swept through there, and then they used that citadel as a prison for women. They took 500 women around there, imprisoned them in there, and they sold them off into slavery back to Syria to different ISIS members. And I thought to myself, when I read that, how many times has that citadel, that area that dates all the way back to the Assyrian Empire, been either used for a great oppression or a great day of liberation. And I realized also that you can't control what happens in posterity, and you can't control what happens before you. All you can control is the time that you are here and what you do with that time. And so what I always tell everybody is embrace where you start. I started in the private sector when I was 42 years old. Okay. And embrace where you start and realize your time, get serious about your mission, get serious about where you are in your time for your company. I tell every veteran, even if they hate their job, when they come out of the military, I go, crush your job for the first 2 years. I hated my job when I first started. Now I love it. But my first 2 years were rough. But I was like, you know what? Who's to say grass is ever greener on the other side? And I just worked my tail off. And at first I thought my first 2 years, I go, as soon as I can pay the people back that hired me, I'm out of here. That's what I thought every single day. I'm going to pay these people back for hiring me, for giving me this opportunity, then I'm out of here. Well, by the time I had paid them back for hiring me, I was doing pretty good, right? And I tell every veteran that's coming out, I go, what you're after is your own personal development. And if you ever do decide to leave there, make the people that hired say, hey man, you're one of the greatest workers we've ever had here. You know, the door's always open. You need a letter of recommendation, anything, let us know. So get serious about your time in history, embrace it, jump in with both feet, knock out your goals, and do it with both grit and grace. Grit means doing it day after day, hour after hour throughout that day, right? So you can put your head on the pillow that night and be proud of what you did. Grace means basically doing it with grace in your interactions with different people, right? Doing it with grace when you're interacting with people and doing different things. But they should always feel that intensity of how serious you take your job, right? You can joke around at different times, whatever else, but you have to have that gravitas with you as well, of how you're approaching your mission, right? And out means basically, the things out means people have to see it and feel it from you. They have to see it and feel it from you as you're going, and develop yourself one step at a time. So, and then all 10 of these things, from your warrior ethos to your deep dives, to dominating the fundamentals, to doing your after action reports, okay, all to creating your SOPs, to developing your team, your swim buddies, all these different things you can immediately implement. These are things that I use every day and will still help push the needle in your business. Thank you guys very much.
How would your title team have fared in the kill house?
Oh,
Do you operate with them the same way that you did with your platoon?
yeah, we've been working on it, so it's interesting because different people have different personalities. My closer is, I kid him around that he's probably on the spectrum somewhere because he's gonna have 100 spinning plates. You never see him sweat. My title coordinator, she escaped North Vietnam in a boat and came over here. Her daughter went to Harvard and Oxford. She's just a voracious worker, and I don't think she ever has a bad day. Just always up, and you feel her energy every single day. Michael's assistant, Sherry, Michael calls her his rock, very quiet, very that just makes everything run smoothly, and then my underwriters are second to none in their knowledge and their expertise. And so you put all that team together, and everybody in the SEAL teams, everybody has different personalities, right? So you get everybody kind of on that same mission. And it's not about personalities, it's about bringing everybody together and kind of working together and creating that vortex of that energy and pushing everybody getting everybody going in the same direction. And to do that takes a lot of energy and effort, and to sustain that takes great energy and effort. And to continually improve while you're doing that takes great energy and effort. But I say embrace that process, enjoy it, and enjoy the fact that everybody's battling in trophy, right? If you're not building, you're deteriorating. Enjoy the fact that everybody has to battle that, and that if you continue to do it, they'll slowly start peeling away market share for you and your team.
It's incredible. Billy, would you mind taking some questions?
No, go ahead.
Anybody have any questions?
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for your service. Being a numbers person, you had me at 220 to 186 to 68. And then what was the number at the end of Hell Week?
The number at the end of Hell Week was 30. And then the number so to become a SEAL, you have to go through BUDS, and then you have to go through jump school. Then you have to go through this thing called SEAL qualification training, which is another 4 months. And then you get cold weather training, and then you become a SEAL. And then you join your platoon with your trident. You're affectionately known as new guy until you get through the first 2 years. You're basically kind of on double secret probation. So, but the originals that started with my class 244 that finished with my class 244, there were 8 of us originals. Okay. Now we had other people that were rolled into my class from 242, 243, 244 for medical stuff or everything that gave them a chance to heal up. And guys from my class that got rolled into other classes. At the end, we graduated about 30, but of those 30, there was only 8 of us that were originals.
Like the folks that don't make it to the SEALs,
Yeah.
do they generally stay in the service in the Navy, or
Well,
they?
yeah, well, once you sign up for the Navy, you sign up for time.
Yeah, right.
Right. So I mean, if you ever look at any Navy recruiting video, it's basically 2 things. It's either Navy SEALs or it's a pilot, right? And so the Navy uses all that cool stuff to get everybody to come in, and then they get pushed into the needs of the Navy.
Got it. Got it. Amazing.
Yes.
Thanks again for the service. Great speech and discussion. So kind of trying to draw parallels and have a question that can be very well in terms of like trust, right?
Yeah.
Throughout your service and your professional career, like how do you think about kind of like natural trust in terms of like delegation and being in a tough situation versus like forced where like I have to trust this person else, like trusting my life. Like, how do you kind of think of that as well?
Well, it's doing hard things together, and it's watching every single day, bringing their A game. Whether you're working on a boat motor, which is not really cool, trying to get and watching who's going to dive into that boat motor without any knowledge and figure this and figure that out that, and watching every single day everybody doing what they do. You slowly build trust with that, and that's aside from personalities, right? I mean, we all got to check our. There's a lot of different alpha mentalities and personalities in the teams, and everybody's got to check that a little bit in order to work with each other. But if somebody has an alpha personality, but they're not jumping into every single thing with both feet and working and helping everybody out, then that's going to start to erode the trust between people. But if somebody has a personality, maybe you don't even like them, but every single time, but they're sitting there going, they're like, Wags, I don't even like you, but I'm going to help you work through this whole thing, right? Then that builds trust. And there's different roles, responsibilities, and duties in the SEAL teams. Like I was an ordnance rep. You have your comms reps. You got first lieutenant. You got all these different groups, and then every platoon has 4 snipers, 4 breachers, 4 communication specialists, 4 intel specialists, and some of those you cover multiple things, and it's making sure that you do your job every single time. Like communications is a funny thing. So the comms guys, a lot of times we're changing the radios and the antennas on the vehicles almost every single missions. They figured out which was the best way that the comms equipment all worked together with everything else that we had going on for SAT, FM, AM, and all these different things. So they're working through that, right? Because if we run into a really bad situation, it's them on the line, right? So it's everybody kind of coming every single day and going the extra mile, and everybody in the SEAL community is very intrinsically motivated, and you're building that trust over time. And I think, and I've heard a business person who's they're a big home builder, and he even told me this. He goes, I find the best way to build a team is doing the real hard things together on a project and getting through it. Who's staying late? Who's going the extra mile? Who's doing these things and stuff? And it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And I think my definition of being someone special is doing things that other people are unwilling to do, right? Obviously, there's like sports figures and stuff that are special because they're just an incredible athlete. But I'm talking about in the business world, doing things that others are unwilling to do. And if you get a team together that's willing to do things that others are unwilling to do, then that will make you and your team special. And then working together in a cohesive unit, which takes time and takes energy, because we're all going to rub each other a little bit the wrong way from time to time, but getting through that and going through there, because the mission is above all, right?
So would you say over your time at SEAL that your trust, like I think about like your bearer and trust, or like how quick it takes to trust another teammate, that has to be increased or decreased as of what we saw?
It increases, but you always have to remind people, right? And there's a fear element to that too, because like in SEAL teams, you can never lie to anybody. In business, you can never lie to any of your clients, right? Like I never tell my clients I can do something until I find out that we can do something, right? But I'll tell them like, hey, let me figure this out for you, run this down for you, or figure it out. So it's but it's everybody being reminded every single time what's required of them. And it's exhausting. It takes monumental effort, and it'll wear you out. And you have to find, if you're the leader of that group too, of where your team needs rest in your battle tempo, and where we can press and push in different areas. Because you don't want to just string everybody else off to dry. You want to be able to give people rest, and then you also want to give credit where credit's due, right? You want to give people credit where they've been doing a great job and doing different things, and you also have to check people if they have a personality conflict, and they're basically saying somebody is not a good SEAL team guy. And then I have this in my communications team. The two team comms guys couldn't get along. And I had to tell the guy who said the other guy wasn't a good comms guy, I go, well, the people at the talk says he hits all his comms windows. He does everything that we ask for him. So where is he not a good communication specialist, right? And then he couldn't think of a reason. And I go, what you have here is you're trying to disparage this individual who is doing a great job but you have a louder and bigger personality than he does. I go, but if he's doing everything we've required of him and everything the mission's required of him, then that's a personality conflict. And you can't come with any criteria, So then you have to check that individual sometimes, right? And then you have to let them know where they do well and where they need to do better, right? And that's the one thing when I talked about that informal after action report, everybody will tell everybody point blank what they did well and what they did wrong, okay, after a mission, right? And I have to do that with my team as well. And luckily my team is a great team, but there was a point about 1.5 years ago where we were getting to the point where we were doing so much volume that I had to restructure my team in order to make sure that we were still delivering that really good service. And some people had to let go of some of their duties and responsibilities that was their little patch of turf. And that was hard for one of the individuals in my team to do. But once they did that, we brought my Leanne, who I talked about earlier, and she was able to take some of that off their shoulders. We went to new heights, right? We were, because my closer was telling me for a little bit, I have multiple closers throughout the country, but my number one guy was like, I can't take any more clients. I go, no. I go, we're going to find a way to restructure this so you can take more clients, right? And we're going to figure that out. So that was a little bit of growing pains, right? So there's going to be growing pains in here. You got to get everybody on board. And that took about a 6-month process for me to get everybody kind of on board, work through all those things. But now they love it, right? Now they're like, oh man, this is the best thing any of us have ever done, right? Because they got less pressure on themselves. We're doing bigger numbers than we've ever done before. Everything's working more smoothly. And but that took a little bit of letting go, and then took a little bit of everybody earning their trust, right? And then doing hard things together. We did the whole JCPenney bankruptcy. That was 345 properties, and I accordioned up my team, ballooned it up to about 30 or 40 people. And I work for the biggest company in the country that does it. So I always tell my management, I go, there's nothing. I tell my clients and my management, I go, nothing we can't solve. We're going to figure it out. And so I ballooned my team up and brought in all these different people, and we were working from 6 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night for a really long time. But I enjoyed it. There was another deal where a client moved something, one of my clients in DC moved something to us on a Saturday. And luckily they told me on Friday. So I told my team, hey, be prepared to work through the weekend. So they moved it to us on Saturday. They said my sister company said they needed 4 more weeks to close this. We closed that deal by next Friday when we got on a Saturday, right? And now that team in DC absolutely loves us, right? So it's doing hard things together. It's doing things that other people are unwilling to do together. And it's working cohesively as a team together. And it's giving your people the credit where credit is due, right? And you can't forget that either, because you never want to lose a great person on your team, right? Because they weren't, you never want to lose that person if they're a great team.
One quick question. What in your opinion made you hear a lot about Jocko Willing, right?
Yeah.
Like the leader among leaders. What do you think about him kind of working with it, made him different as a leader?
Working with him is in what made the difference.
Serving with him, I should say.
Yeah.
It's very good.
So I was never directly under Jocko's command. I wish I would have been. I had great officers, so I was proud to serve with all my officers. Jocko, everything you see Jocko talk on YouTube or in his books and stuff, Jocko lived all that and still lives that to this day. So Jocko, like one of the people in his task unit, said, Wags, every time I go to sleep, Jocko's in uniform, still working super hard. Every time I wake up and come to the talk, Jocko's in uniform working super hard. He goes, I don't know if the guy ever slept during deployment, I assure you he did, but he was going to lift up every rock and do every different thing. One of the things that Jocko did for his team was, like, when you give an award like for valor, for a Bronze Star, or Silver Star, any of these awards, or a Navy Cross overseas, that takes an immense amount of paperwork. It's a crazy amount of effort. Well, the military had decided that everybody's gonna get one award at the end of their deployment. Okay, and whatever you did during that deployment, they're just gonna write it up and everyone gets one award. Well, Jocko, being Jocko, said no. My guys earned this award on this day, that award on this day, that award on this day, this award on that day. And the amount of paperwork that man had to go through to do that, to push it in for his guys, to give them credit for what they did on those different days, plus get the award at the end of their deployment. I can't even imagine the amount of time that he spent writing those things up and doing it, because I guarantee you it was in the hundreds of hours. Okay. And then to be able to push it through when people said no, and Jocko continually did that, and he would push everything, and he demanded a lot out of his guys, right? But he took great care of them as well. So he was one of those leaders that pushed the envelope on every area and also rewarded his guys for that as well, right? So his task unit is one of the most highly decorated task units because he was just willing to put in and do work that other managers or commanders were not going to do, right? And not to say that the other groups, our task unit or other task units didn't do many of the same things or whatever else, but him being that leader went the extra mile in his leadership to make sure that all his guys were getting taken care of,